This template is used to help game out your strategy for doing a firefighter test, or it applies to pretty much any goal that you want to accomplish in life. And it covers some angles that you might not think of normally when you're preparing for this thing. So if you use it, it's going to be really helpful. There's nothing magical about this template or any of the other ones if you don't do the work. So these work if you do. So do the work, spend the time to do them, spend a lot of hours working on them, working on yourself. And this can be really helpful because it can identify some areas that have proven to be successful across all different formats. There's a saying, and it goes back to Jim Rohn. He was Tony Robbins' mentor, and what he said is that success leaves clues. And so these ideas don't come just from me. It's come from a lot of studies from a lot of different people, and it can apply to any area of your life. Under the Run Into the Fire channel, we're focusing on firefighter promotion, so I'm super confident this will help for this. I have used this to help coach some people, and they've had really great results with it. So this is how it works. I recommend setting a 90-day target or a strategy, because if you chunk things into 90 days, it's a good short time frame that you can work with specific measurable actions. A lot of businesses measure their progress by quarterly reports, and so the 90 days is a good section. I recommend you start out, if you're going to be testing, I recommend that you start in advance of 90 days, but this 90 days is a good way to have your plan and to follow that plan for 90 days. So up top here is the title, 90-day strategy. It doesn't have to be 90 days, but it'll be helpful if you have a set time. You put the date on top, and then it's a measuring tool, and I'll quickly go through it and then I'll explain each step. So the first one is you have to have a simple, specific, measurable target. And it has to be yes or no. Then there's a scale of 1 to 10. 10 would be that you're totally on point with this, and a 1 would be that you haven't made any progress at this. A 10 would be that you have a clear, specific path, and a 1 is that you're very general and broad and don't know exactly what you want. And you're not measuring it all. So simple, specific, measurable target. Each one of these words that's in here was chosen for a reason. So simple, keep it specific and measurable. And the term target is know what you want to hit. A plane that flies to Hawaii from LA is off course 90% of the time. But almost every time they land in Hawaii. And so you constantly have to know what you want. You have to know your target, and you're going to get off track, but you need to keep course correcting and coming back on track when you miss it. So number 1 is specific, measurable target. Number 2 is an environment and proximity. There's a saying that proximity is power. You are who you spend time with. And there's even a lot of studies that have been done that if you take your 5 closest friends or the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and your income, your health, and most areas of life are going to reflect that. The studies that have been done were done on income, and you are a product of your environment. So you have to spend a lot of time choosing those environments that are going to help progress you towards your goal, not drag you down. And then under here, it's setting a place. So as you set your action items, it's really important to define a space that you're going to work on them. There's a saying about willpower that with environment is that if you start looking at willpower, and if you do any studies on willpower, you tend to find out that humans in general don't have that much willpower. And we don't do that great when things are set up for willpower alone. But a lot of these studies have found out that what plays a much bigger impact is the environment that you put yourself in. So what I suggest is you define what that environment is. You use the small amount of willpower that you have, and you use it to control your environment, to set up your environment for success. So number 2 is environment and proximity. Surround yourself. So another good point about proximity is you don't take advice from people who don't have the results that you're after. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody wants to give advice. But if the person that's giving you advice has not produced this result in their own life, then they're not doing the work and they're not producing the fruit. A tree is known by its fruit. And if that person is not doing the work to produce that fruit, the advice isn't going to be worth anything. So choose your environment, choose the proximity, and choose people that have the result that you want. The saying, success leaves clues. Choose people that have the result that you want. You don't want to go to a sick doctor. You don't want to take fitness advice from someone who's out of shape. You don't want to take finance advice from a broke person. The same thing goes with testing. If you're taking advice on promotional testing from someone who's never tested, or they've tested but they haven't done well, I don't recommend taking that advice. So that's 2. So the third one is mentors. Again, this goes back with proximity. Choose mentors that have the result that you want. Period. If they don't produce the result, if they haven't produced the result, they're not capable of the result, then they're most likely not going to be able to teach you to get the result. So mentors is important. And then we have team. Sounds kind of cliche, but nothing happens without teamwork. Teamwork is pivotal, it's fundamental, and it's necessary. So for this, you need to define your team, who your team is, and how you guys are going to work together to create this goal. It's a really important concept that there's this concept of creating synergy. And if you have the equation, I'll type it in down here so you can see it. There's this equation, this comes from Stephen Covey. The equation is 1 + 1. What do you think the answer would be? Common sense, common math would say 1 + 1 = 2. But in the case of synergy, when you get together, there's a saying that when 2 or more people are gathered, and this comes from Christianity, where Jesus says, when 2 or more are gathered in my name, I will be there. And so there's this concept of it, when 2 people get together and put their mind towards something, there's more that happens than just 2 people getting together. And there's another concept that people call, they call it the mastermind, is that when you combine with someone else, it's thought that you sync your minds together and you end up creating way more than either one of you could have done by yourself. So the concept here is you pick a team that's going to allow you to succeed. 1 + 1 = 3. The other part is rituals, consistent rituals, and that's it goes under the force of habits. There's a force of habits, is that if you do something simple every single day towards your result, it's going to yield much greater results than if you just try to hit a home run. Under this, the concept of habits and rituals, is there's the concept of baseball, is you have the person that comes up trying to hit a home run every single time, and most of the time that guy's going to strike out. And when they do finally hit a home run, they're going to be way behind the game because they spent all their time trying to hit a home run. So how this can apply to testing for the fire service is, don't think you're going to cram everything into one day, or that you're going to go to some academy and cram it all in 1 week. Those type of immersion experiences are really helpful, but it can't compete with the person. So back to the baseball example. You take the person that shows up to bat, and every single time they go to bat, they hit a single and move on one base. At first, it's not going to seem like that big of a deal. But once the bases get loaded, if that entire team, all they do is hit singles, then they're going to outscore the person that's trying to hit a home run every single time, and they're going to dominate that game. So set up your rituals for success. And then this here is massive 10x action. A couple other terms I added under here. So I'll explain the 10x action first. So 10x is that if you apply the time, energy, and effort, and you apply, there's another video on here called the 5 investments. And so if you watch that video, it'll tie into this 10x concept also. And the concept is that if you spend 10 times the amount of preparation than your opponent, then you're almost guaranteed to totally dominate in that competition. 10x, instead of the other concept behind this 10x principle, is that you'll spend, usually when you take on a project such as doing a promotional test or a firefighter test, you're not going to think your initial projection is you're going to think it's going to take X amount of work. And what it's really going to take is 10 times that amount. So whatever you think it's going to take in terms of time, energy, your energy, your money investment, times that number by 10, and that's going to massively increase your chance for success and to do great at the process. So it's massive action. It's not talking about just passive action. It's talking about taking big action items, do the courageous, necessary things you have to do, seek out those challenging environments so that you can grow and expand by this action. So massive 10x action is you're taking way more action than anybody else. This concept of time under tension is that you're seeking out discomfort. There's a saying that I like a lot, and it says, your life exists just beyond your comfort zone. And so when you're going to test, it's not going to be comfortable. And so I acknowledge you for even preparing to test, but realize the promotional process is going to be stressful. How you prepare for that stress is you create that stress beforehand. There's another saying that the hard road becomes easy. And so seek out these hard, challenging experiences and put yourself in high pressure situations, because in that you're going to learn the best lessons. The more that you can fail before the test, the quicker you're going to learn and the faster you're going to progress. So the saying that is you want time under tension. This goes into the concept of repetition. Here's another saying. I've got a lot of sayings for this one. Another one is repetition is the mother of all skill. So this goes with the 10x action, is don't be someone who goes and runs through a training just once and feels great about it. You want to be the person that does the training, the one simple training that everybody thinks they have down, and you do it 100 times because you get it to a muscle memory, you get it to a place of mastery, and that you do the simple thing, the simple fundamentals over and over again. That was something that Coach John Wooden taught his basketball players, that allowed them to be the most successful basketball team, I believe the most successful basketball team in history. And he was always very diligent about focusing on fundamentals. He'd have his players go out and they would just do layups again and again and again until they just got it to where they couldn't fail. So you want to get to the point to where not that you get it right the first time, but you do it so many times that you can't fail. So that's the repetition part of it. Another saying is you get steps and reps. So I threw a lot of words in here, but the concept is that you have a massive action plan, and this action involves pressure, it involves challenge, and it pushes you beyond your comfort zone, and there's tons and tons of repetition. And then number 7 is that you're constantly getting feedback and you're redirecting your focus as needed. You're going to come up with a plan on how your test is going to go and how you're going to prepare for this test. And it's going to get sidetracked. You're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to course correct along the way. So the saying here, or getting the feedback, is going to allow you to stay on course and not get too far off. So I'm going to add that word under here also. Course correct. So the concept of the course correct is that, say you decided you're going to run a marathon. And you start running the marathon, and it's a marathon that goes through the forest. And you're jogging, and you're following these markers for the trail, but sometimes the trail's not all that clear. And say you end up missing a marker, and you start running. And you keep running, and you keep running, and you keep running, and you don't find out that you're off the course until you get 2 miles into it. And then you find out you have to turn around and run all the way back just to get back on your course to finish the race. So the concept of feedback, focus, and course correct is that you're running that same race. Your finish line is to get the position, get the job you want. And as you're running that race, you're going to get off course. And if you got feedback from your mentors, from your team, you want to course correct as soon as you get off track. So for the example of running the race, as soon as you get less than a quarter mile off the route, your friend reminds you, or you somehow get the feedback and you notice that you're going in a totally opposite direction of where you want to go. You're studying something that's not relevant, or you start doing some other project that's totally not relevant. you want to course correct, turn around, and that way you can finish the race without getting way off course. Sometimes people do this and they get so far off track they never make it to the finish line. So consistent feedback and focus. Look for feedback. Have the courage to ask the people around you, ask your mentors, ask your team, how are you doing and how could you be doing better? In order to do this well, you constantly have to check your ego, because the ego is not going to like it very much. But your ego is going to get in your way if you don't put it in check. So you're not doing this for your ego. You're doing this to get a level of mastery. A lot of times the ego is going to get in your way of doing this. The ego is going to look at doing all this repetition and it's going to think you don't need to do it. It's going to think you're better than that. It's going to shy away from getting the feedback because it doesn't want to get hurt by negative feedback. And if you get good feedback, then it could get overinflated and think you don't have to do the work. So I need to course correct. That might have gotten off a little bit. I'll cover this one more time and how this form works. So how this form is designed to work is that what you do is you go through here, and this is where you're currently at on the left side. And you evaluate yourself. And again, it's a little bit more of an art than it is an exact science. So don't get too caught up in having to do it right. Just go along with it. It's more, there's a science to it because you're measuring it to an extent, but it's more of an art because you have to create it as you go. So your 90-day strategy, and you start here by what is your simple, specific, measurable target. And what we could say is that I want, the font's kind of off, but I'll just go with it. Want to be #1 on captain test. Captain test, firefighter test, whatever test it is. And so that's a good start. You want to be the best. You want to be at the captain test. And then the more details at Fire Station 1 on May 28th, 2018. So this is where you're going to get more points. Is the more specific you can be, the more that you can measure it, the more clarity you can have. And there's a saying that clarity is power. So your target, is this a yes or no? Can you measure this? #1, test on this date. At the end of this date, can you say, yes, I got my target, or yes, I didn't? Absolutely. So this works. From there, now you can measure 0 to 10. Is this clear, specific, measurable? This is pretty good, but it can be better. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to make it bold or underline, whatever you want to do. Let's just do underline. And you can print it out and write on it if you want. But that's pretty good. That's a pretty good target because it's fairly specific. You have your date, you have your location, you have your fire department, and that works well. Can it be better? Absolutely. You could then chunk it down. This is where the 90-day strategy comes in. Is you say that this is still a few months out, and you say I want to log 100 hours of training. I want XX. I want this certificate. I can't spell. I want to complete this project. I want to do 100 practice oral boards or interviews. And you can go on and on. The more clarity, the better. So a good way this ends up working is that you then end up having, this is where your map starts, and this is where your action plan starts, is you have this, you have your project, you have certificate you might need to test, you want to log 100 hours of training, and then from here you can start chunking it down. There's a saying that if you want to eat an elephant, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So testing for a fire department test or any big project you want in life, it's going to take a lot to get there. So you get the big elephant here. Here's the big elephant you want, and then you start chunking it down into these smaller little bite-sized things you have to do to get there. And to go back to the saying, clarity is power. So ultimately, what it would look like to get a 10 in this area would be that you have this clear, specific, detailed plan, and every single day leading up to that test, you have curriculum that you have to do. And at the end of that day, you could say, did I get my outcome? Yes, I got my win for the day, or no. And that way, when you come for the test, you're ready. You either know that you're as prepared as you can be, or that you didn't do your best. Going back to Coach John Wooden, another thing that he would say was, it's not about what the scoreboard shows. It's about whether you gave your absolute best on the court today. And he said, if you do that, then the score will take care of itself. So this is part of like you take ownership of the win and you do your absolute best possible, knowing that you did everything, and more than likely you're going to stack the odds highly in your favor. So this is a way higher probability of happening. So simple, specific, measurable target, that's one, and that's what it would look like there. So environment proximity, what this could look like is, again, where are you at currently? Say, well, when I'm at home, my kids drive me crazy, and the station I'm at, I'm busy, I never get time to study. So let's say you score a 3 because you don't have a place, and you don't got a peer group you're around. So your action items could be, one, set office space at home when kids are at school. 2, take college course. You could do a college course on leadership, because you're going to be around other people that have a similar mindset. Maybe I should take a spelling class. And then again, go move to shift with people who have promoted. So this could be another option, is you could work shifts or end up being around people that have promoted, that have been successful. And just some ideas here. So measure where you are, measure what you need to up your game, and then you'll constantly go back and review the sheet. You'll constantly update these over here, and you'll constantly evaluate and measure your numbers. Moving on to mentors. So say you start out here and you don't have any mentors. Again, a mentor is someone that has the result you want. And you say, call Joe, ask for help, and offer to do his landscape. There's a saying is that if you're gonna ask someone for help, you want to contribute to them, and don't just show up asking for their help. Offer to help in exchange for that. So you call Joe, who's got number 1 on the last test, and offer to do something in exchange, or just don't show up expecting to take everything without contributing back. And then that would help you, because if you get a mentor with the result, it'll help you get your score up. Your team. So this is a good one. So say you got a team, you're like, I've got a group of guys that we're testing, and so say you get a 6 on that, and maybe this would be team up with Jim and Scott, who are also testing. Schedule to meet at least 1 time per week at station 1. So that would be your team, and it also addresses, you set a place, so you go back up here to environment. Is define your team, and you set up your team for success. I encourage to team up with people that you're testing against, because that competitive side is going to drive each of you. I've done well at an engineer test, and I tested number 1 on this last captain test, and I did that by pairing up with people that drove me. When I did the engineer test, the guy that I prepared with, he got number 1, I got number 3, but I was super proud for him to be successful. And it so happened when I did the captain's test, is I happened to get number 1, and the guy I studied with got number 3. You know, it kind of sucks if you're not the number 1 spot, but you guys push each other. The concept of iron sharpening iron applies to this. And if you have a team member that you're competing with, it helps to create a bond, and it also pushes you harder than if you're just doing it by yourself. So consistent rituals. So under here you could say, I don't know, just say you give yourself a 5 because you can't really think of much. But you just say every morning I read book for 20 minutes, 5 days a week. So something like that, just something small, something simple that's going to help prepare you for the test, but you just do it consistently every day. Something about these rituals is that try to keep it as simple as possible. Don't make this any more complicated than it needs to be. If you make it too complex, you end up screwing it up. And that's the most common thing most of us do, is that we get this big elaborate ritual and then we make it so complex we never do it. So clarity is power. Simplicity, the more simple the better. So this is an example, 5 days a week for 20 minutes. First thing in the morning, read a book. That's simple, it's doable. It's just a matter of creating that habit. There's a lot of people that say it takes 21 days to create a habit. So it may take time to instill the habit, but make sure that this habit's going to serve you. Massive 10x action. So this is where you can kind of tie in with your plan that's up here. And these two kind of work together. So this is the target, and you could probably say you can put stuff up here because these are the smaller targets, or you could take these ones that are up here and put it down towards the massive action. So under here, and this is where you want to get time under tension, you want to get repetition. So here is you could sign up for Academy, volunteer, tier time at Fire School. This is where the numbers can come in handy, is that say that you want to do, say if you're doing a oral board, then you say I want to do 50 video, maybe 50 is quite a few. So at least 20 video recorded oral board I can't write oral board interviews. And again, you can just break down the steps. It's part of chunking it down. And ideally, you think what a 10 would be for you. A 10 would be that every day you're training 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. And you're preparing like Rocky prepares when he's going to fight Ivan Drago. And that's all you do is prepare for this test. Maybe that's what a 10 would look like. And you're measuring it every week just to see how you can improve. And specific action, and again, simplicity is really helpful, and so you want to get tons and tons of repetitions in. And here we have feedback and focus. So you're getting feedback, you're getting focus. How much feedback are you getting, and how consistent is the feedback that you're getting, and how do you keep your focus? So if the score is low, then what you want to do is say, talk with my captain, teacher, professor, friend, whoever it may be in your life that you work with that has a relationship with you, wife, kids, whoever it may be. The feedback can come from all around. And ask them about my strengths and weakness for this goal, and to get a better score, and do this with one person every week. So there's an example there. Spell check doesn't work, so screw it. So that's it. Again, this is a tool. The tool only works if you use it and if you spend the time to know how to use it and be the most effective with it. So I hope it's helpful. I'll give one final review on how the whole thing works, and that'll be the conclusion of this video. So it's a template for your strategy. It's helpful to have a 90-day outcome because that's a short time. This left column is where you currently are. Is you take where you currently are in each of these areas and you measure it from 1 to 10. 10 is you're doing exceptionally well and you're doing the best possible. 1 is that you're not doing anything and you're doing the least possible. So you have specific measurable target, environment proximity, mentors, team, consistent rituals, massive 10x action, which includes time under tension and sets and reps, and you're getting feedback and focus. And then over here is you write out the action plan so that you can move the bar up on each of these. What are you going to do to make progress so that you can measure? Hope this was helpful. I have to tell you that when I tested number 1 on the captain test, I sat down with my wife. I used this form, and I sat down with my wife and I went over this. And I worked on this for several months up to that moment. And it was maybe a week before the process. And I went through each of these areas and I ranked myself probably on an 8 to 10 on all of these areas. And I sat there and I told her, I said, look, if there's anything to this, there's no way that I'm not going to be successful at this. And sure enough, I did exceptionally well. I tested at the top of the list in a very competitive process. And it's, again, it's the saying that success leaves clues, and it's a measurable way to look at how well you're doing. I know that if you're going to really rank yourself excellent on all these areas, you geometrically increase the chance of your success. Thanks for watching. I wish you the best. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and below this video is the link for this strategy. If not, then send us email at runintothefire1@gmail.com. God bless. Thank you very much.